I know in the last several lectures, we've talked about some rather intense and dense themes. And if you haven't had any exposure to political philosophy or contemporary or postmodern political philosophy, it can be rather overwhelming. So let me just say this, and to help kind of alleviate any anxiety. Try as best you can to get a architecture over the ideas and the movement of the course. And if you can do that, you will be well on your way, one, to kind of mastering the ideas themselves, and equally as important, how the ideas relate to each other, how they flow and how they move. Because if you just kind of start thinking about it all at once, it's overwhelming, right? Because one, the ideas, they're powerful and they're deep, and in some ways they're overwhelming on multiple levels, okay? And if you try to think it all at one go, it's truly too much. So if you ever feel overwhelmed, take a deep breath and impose an architecture. Say to yourself, one, this is a course on Greek tragedy. It's a course on Nietzsche's interpretation of Greek tragedy. So what is that? And we did that. We did that for 2 lectures, right? What is Nietzsche's interpretation or analysis of Greek tragedy, right? And we said, for Nietzsche, Greek tragedy represents a comprehensive worldview. 2, it also represents what he calls, or embodies what he calls, the tragic or heroic perspective. And then we talked about those 4 important points. And then 3, the third thing for Nietzsche, when we talk about Greek tragedy, we're also talking about specific examples of art, of cultural production, one of which we're reading called Sophocles' Antigone, okay? And all of that is important for Nietzsche because it produces a certain kind of person who is kind of emotionally fierce and intellectually powerful and creative. And these people, and Nietzsche valorizes these people because they're emotionally fierce and they're intellectually creative, and because they know what the world is like. They know the world has no inherent meaning or purpose. They know that all meaning, value, and purpose is a human invention and it's an assertion of power. They know that no matter how beautiful and sublime and necessary and profound these human inventions are, the lives we build, the empires we build, the art we create, they know that no matter how important and existentially necessary and beautiful and profound these things are, they are fragile. And why are they fragile? Because they're thrown into a world, they're invented and inserted and thrown into a world that in and of itself has no meaning, value, or purpose, and that is constantly undergoing transformation and is hostile to our design, which means that our meanings and our values and purposes are fragile and they come apart and they collapse. And so do human lives. We're mortal, we die, right? And they know that. And despite the fact that they know that, they do it anyways, and they still do it. They continue to do it. They reinvent, they recreate, they reassert. They don't let the realism of the world, what Nietzsche calls pessimism in the attempt at self-criticism, they don't let it cripple them or break them or make them life-hating. They know how the world is. They know that meaning, value, and purpose is a human invention. It's their invention. It's an assertion of power. It's a naming and opening and meaningfulness of the world itself. But that whole process is always agonistic. It's always conflictual. It's always going to be challenged. And in and through that challenge, sometimes things end. Sometimes lives end. Dreams die. People you love more than your own life are lost. That's the tragedy. And there's nothing you and I can do about it. And most of the time, the heavy tragedies come. We don't see it coming, and there's nothing we can do about it, right? Things get shattered, what Nietzsche will call the Dionysian. Things get shattered. In some ways, we're living the Dionysian right now. COVID-19 has shattered technology. It's shattered our hubris about our science, our hubris about our technology, our hubris about our economic systems, our hubris about the stability of our political systems. COVID-19 has shattered it. It's shattered your senior year. It's gone. Fragile. Now, in the moment of that fragility, in the moment of that shattering, who are you? Are you emotionally fierce enough and intellectually creative enough to survive the shattering, right? And then come out of it and reinvent, reanimate, recreate, redefine new meaning, new value, new purpose. Okay, that's what we've done so far. And then we had to say, look, okay, Nietzsche's interpretation and his valorization of the tragic Greeks brings him into direct conflict with Socrates and Plato, right? With the emergence of metaphysics, okay? Right? What is it about metaphysics? What is metaphysics? What is it about metaphysics that Nietzsche is critical of? Well, again, I don't want to repeat the whole story, but this idea that there's an objective truth, and that there's a true justice, there's a true moral life, there's a true proper life, there's a justice, and there's a true self. And that the purpose of life from the Socratic and Platonic point of view is to acquire knowledge about that and live that path, just live that path. That's what life is. The project of life is a moral project. Okay, that's what Nietzsche criticizes. Why? Okay, why does Nietzsche criticize that vision? Okay, that question takes us to step 3. That now takes us to a kind of an introduction of what postmodernism is. Why does Nietzsche criticize that? Why? Why does he criticize Socrates and Plato's idea that there's an objective truth to nature, to justice, some moral truth, and that there's an objective truth to Nick Dungy, to each one of our personalities? Why? Okay, well, this brings us to an introduction of postmodernism. And this is what we talked about on Tuesday. And there's 2 themes here. One, the postmoderns are very suspicious about that truth, right? They're concerned about that truth, right? They're suspicious about its existence. And then 2, as we just said a few minutes ago before we started, right? What really gets them going, what Nietzsche really drives Nietzsche, what really drives Foucault, is this question: what are the consequences to our minds? Are we anxious? Are we afraid? Are we oppressed? Are we terrified? What are the consequences to our minds, our bodies, and our politics from our belief in and commitment to some moral truth? And ultimately, as we will see for Nietzsche and Foucault, those consequences are extraordinarily negative. They're profoundly negative. And hence what I sent you, my lecture notes, Nietzsche famously said, what's the value of our highest values? Right? What if our highest values are traditional metaphysical morals, Platonic, Christian, or Enlightenment? What if those aren't good for us? In fact, not only not good for us, but what if they're destroying us psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, politically? Right? And that's where we are. And so if you just get some architecture to it, okay, what are the big ideas? What's Nietzsche's understanding of tragedy? Okay, bam, I got that. How does that lead to a critique of Platonic and Christian metaphysics? Well, before that, you got to know what that is. Okay, what is that? What is metaphysics? Bam, you've got that in your notes. How does that lead us to what the hell postmodernism is? Oh, okay, what the hell is postmodernism? 1, 2, bam. And now the 4th point of the original outline. Nominalism. How is it? Okay, so now we know what, at least how we're going to use it in this course, what postmodernism is. It's an extraordinary suspicion about the truth and a true self. And it's also this concern, this profound concern about the consequences to our minds and our bodies and our politics that result from our belief in the truth and our commitment to its moral practices. Okay, that's what postmodernism is. Now, how, point 4, right? And if you get all of this, you're going to master this. Now, point 4, okay. So the next logical question, but the next question would be, okay, how does postmodernism critique metaphysics? Right? What's the theoretical tool that enables Nietzsche and later Foucault or Judith Butler or Derrida or leotard or Rorty, what's the tool that they generally, obviously there's nuances between all of them, of course, but what's the tool that they use to kind of dismantle, question, get into, kind of, pull threads here and there to kind of watch the whole metaphysical apparatus kind of come apart? What's the tool? How do they do it? Right? There's got to be some theoretical apparatus or some theoretical tool, some theoretical device, right? Nietzsche and Foucault just can't simply say, well, I don't think the truth exists, and you just got to trust me, right? Right? Or they can't say, hey, the value of your highest values is actually killing you, and trust me. They can't say that. There's got to be some tool. What's the tool? How do they decenter? How do they kind of interrogate metaphysics? And the answer, the general answer, is nominalism. And nominalism is a theory of what language is and how language works. So that the theoretical tool that the postmodernists use to decenter metaphysics, whether it's a Platonic metaphysics, Christian metaphysics, or some sort of Enlightenment scientific metaphysics, right? The tool they use is called nominalism, and nominalism can be defined as a kind of alternative account and description of three things. What language is, how it operates, and how it is constantly contingent, how it is by its very being. I don't want to say essence or nature because that sounds too metaphysical. How it is by its very being and movement contingent. And by contingent, I mean two things: unstable, inherently unstable, and undergoing constant transformation. Okay? So let's step back and recap. How do the postmoderns critique Platonic, Christian, or Enlightenment metaphysics? How do they critique? How do they say, I'm suspicious about the existence of an objective truth, and I'm even concerned about your belief in and commitment to that objective truth. I'm concerned of the consequences to what it does to your mind, your body, and your politics. How does that critique go? How do they do it? They say, okay, well, they do it through an alternative account of language called nominalism. Right? And nominalism, like I said, it's an alternative account of language about what language is, how it works, how it moves, how it operates, and the recognition that it is contingent. And the word contingent means something specific. It means that it's unstable. Contingent things are unstable things, right? That they're contingent, that they're unstable, and they're undergoing constant transformation. Okay? So the tool that Nietzsche will use is an account of language, a theory of language that is going to challenge. I used the word alternative account of language earlier. It's alternative because it challenges the traditional metaphysical account of mind and language. Okay, so before we say anything about nominalism, okay, I just want to say a few things about the core assumptions about language, about mind and language, that all metaphysical systems of thought have to make. Okay, and by the way, all of this is kind of intuitive if you just don't overthink it. Okay, it's kind of intuitive. And by the way, you know this to be true in a way because in some ways we are all the heirs of some type of metaphysical philosophy, religion, or science. And even though we're not accustomed to thinking about it in this way, because we are the heirs of some metaphysical system of thought, we have built in assumptions about what mind is and what language is. All right? What I want to do right now is bring those assumptions up. I'm going to bring them in the clearing so we can see them as assumptions and we can see what they are. And then once we see what they are, we're in a better space, we're in a better place to understand what nominalism is, why nominalism is critical of those assumptions, okay? So before we talk about nominalism, let's just talk briefly about the assumptions that are at the very foundation of all metaphysical systems of thought, especially as they relate to how they think about mind, and more specifically the content in mind, in our minds, and how they think about language, okay? How they think about language, all right? And all of this is going to follow already from the things we said about metaphysics a couple lectures ago, okay? If you go back in your lecture notes and the outline, and we look at those, especially the first 2 or 3 big points about what metaphysics is, you can see now the discussion we're about to have right now is just the sort of the mental and the linguistic version or elements of those bigger ideas. So before we get to nominalism, we must identify some basic assumptions, right, about the relationship between mind and language that are essential to all metaphysical systems of thought. Okay, so are we good? We know where we are? Okay, all right, first.
Wait, Professor, I'm sorry, the relationship between mind and what?
And language.
Thank you.
And metaphysical systems of thought. Or to put it in another way, Jennifer, Plato is an advocate, has a system of philosophy that is metaphysical. He says some truth is out there. You and I are rational human beings. If we activate our mind and we talk to each other through dialogue and discussion, right? Like Socrates did, like Kant did. If we do that properly, we will get closer and closer and closer to what?
The truth.
The truth. About what? About justice. About what else? Our own nature.
Yourself.
Yeah, all that stuff. All right. So what assumptions, before we can even talk about nominalism, we need to at least kind of illuminate what assumptions does Plato make about mind and language? Right? And by the way, you know what these assumptions are. So think about it. So first, for all metaphysical systems of thought, they all must assume in some way, the stories are different, to be sure, right? Plato's story about mind is different than the Christian story about mind. And the Enlightenment scientific story of mind is different than both New Testament Christianity and Platonism. They even have a different linguistic ways of thinking about it. The stories are different, but the assumptions are the same, right? So let's think about a Platonic notion of what mind is, right? Plato says that human beings are by nature what kind of creatures?
Rational.
They're rational, okay? And they loosely defined it in this: reason is a special faculty unique to human beings that is in us by nature, right? That gives us awareness of the truth. And then if we activate it through philosophy, if we activate it, right? If Socrates shows up and starts asking questions and we start having deep philosophical discussions about these things, we slowly acquire knowledge, right? That's the story, right? So whatever reason is for Plato, it is something that is, while it's simultaneous with the body, it's not produced by the body, nor is it reducible to it, right? That's why they talk about reason as being a kind of mystical thing, right? Right? Reason for Platonists, for Kant and for Plato, reason, whatever reason is it produced by the material functions, the biochemical functions of the body? No, absolutely not. And when the body dies, according to Plato, whatever reason is, whatever mind is, what does it do? It goes what? Goes somewhere. Same in Christianity. Think about, if you're a Christian, think about the soul, right? And by the way, this is the soul-body dualism in Christianity. If you're a Christian, you believe you possess a what?
So,
A soul. Okay. All right. And what is it? It's a kind of a special mystical thing, right? And by the way, is the soul produced by your body?
No.
No. Damn straight it's not produced by the body. It's not a material phenomenon. And when the body dies, does the soul die?
No.
No, of course not. So whatever the soul is, we'll put it in some clumsy language. Whatever the soul is, it is simultaneous with the body, right? But it's not produced by it, nor reducible to it, right? It's both, and this is the mind-body dualism in philosophy and the soul-body dualism in religion. Whatever reason is for Plato, and whatever the soul is for the Christians, it's both attached to the body, but not attached to the body. It's transcendent, right? Because the body doesn't produce it, and it doesn't die when the body dies. So when I say in a Platonic sense, or when I say in a Christian sense, for Plato, reason is and that's what I mean by special. It's a special, mystical, magical, call it whatever you want. It's a special, mystical ability, right? That is unique to humans, that seems to be in some way associated with my body, because it's Nick Dungy that's speaking, it's Nick Dungy that is thinking, or in the Christian sense, it's Nick Dungy that has a soul, right? It's associated with my material existence, but it is at the same time different from it, right? And that's what I mean when I say for Plato, reason is simultaneous with a material existence, but it's not produced by it or reducible to it. It's kind of, there's a mind-body dualism. Same in Christianity. There's a soul-body dualism. Okay. Now, so in terms of metaphysical conceptions of mind, that's the first thing to know, right? Now, in addition, for all metaphysical systems of thought, whatever reason is as mind, or whatever soul is as mind, that's probably a clumsy way of thinking about it, right? But whatever those things are in humans, according to Plato, or according to New Testament Christianity, right? Those things, reason or the soul, in a really kind of fantastic way, both as a playful use of fantastic and even as a serious use of fantastic, in a sort of fantastic way, those things, reason and mind, soul in Christianity, those things already either have in them or provide direct access to what? The truth.
The truth.
That's truth. Right? So technically speaking, I'll just speak about Plato right now. For human beings who are rational, to be rational for Plato in some way means that we all, in our mind, in our reason, and what reason can do for us, we already have access to all the knowledge we will ever need, all the truth we will ever need. For Plato, the real problem is just figuring that out and then getting to it. If we wanted to put it, I made a bad joke on my notes about this, right? Maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. But if you wanted to think about this in a modern technological way, for Plato, knowledge about the truth is already downloaded as content in our what?
Our minds.
In our minds. Beautiful, Jacob. Right? If you wanted to think about this in a computer coding sort of way, a metaphysical coding sort of way, right? According to Plato, and in Plato's notion of reason, whatever the truth is, whatever content is, right? Think about God as a coder, right? Think about nature as a coder, God as a coder, programmer, right? And in reason, inside reason, according to Plato, inside the soul, according to Christianity, is already downloaded all the knowledge about the truth you and I require. It's there, downloaded.
Professor?
Yep.
So does that mean that we can never grow beyond what is already inside of us? We can never expand?
Okay,
beyond
well,
that?
can you just, Linda, can you write that question down on your notes and then ask me later?
Yes, Professor.
Because it's one of the key questions. But if I answer it now, I'm gonna break rhythm, and I don't want to make things any more confusing for anybody by breaking it up, answering your question, and then trying to get back.
I apologize, Professor. Thank you.
No, don't apologize. No, it in one way or another, that is the most important question of the whole damn class. In fact, that's the question that Nietzsche and Foucault are obsessed with. And that's that's a version of the issue that postmodern is obsessed with. So don't apologize. It's a great question, but let me finish and then we'll answer it, okay?
Thank you, Professor.
But write it down so you don't forget it. Because I'll forget it for sure, because I'm old, okay?
Professor,
Yes.
really quickly. So see if that's right. For human beings that are rational, we in our mind already have the access we need to acquire the knowledge to help achieve the truth.
Yep. Beautiful.
But now here's the question: is the truth like our truth or
Nope.
everybody else's truth?
No, and so, okay, Jennifer, you answer the question for me. You already have enough knowledge in just these couple of lectures to answer that question. If it's a metaphysical truth, is it your truth or an objective truth?
Well, it's my truth.
Nope, not your truth.
Because so the matter of fact, it applies to everybody, right?
Yep.
All the time and everywhere.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Right? Let's put this in the language of religion, right? If we're talking about truth as God, right, and you've got a soul, is that your God, or are you aware of a God that applies to everybody?
A God that applies to everybody.
Perfect, Jennifer. Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Now, so again, I think I'm boring you guys, so I'll speed it up a little bit here. The critical thing to know, right, about all metaphysical systems of thought, philosophical, theological, or scientific, is in some way or another that awareness and potential knowledge of the truth is something we already possess by nature. It's in us. It's in our mind. Content is already in the mind. Okay? Now the question of whether it's good content or bad content, or whether you know you can improve your understanding of the content, that's ultimately what philosophy is about. But it's there. And it's the same thing in religion. And this makes sense. If you don't overthink it, it's intuitive. Right? And this is why I said you guys already know this. If you are in some deep way committed to a metaphysical religion, if you're committed to the idea that you have a soul, right? you are committed, you are committed to a foundational assumption that soul makes you aware of and connects you to what?
God.
Everything.
To God. And to what kind of knowledge?
Objective.
Yeah, objective knowledge and moral knowledge. That's right. And then, again, don't ever think this. And then if you are in some way committed to some type of metaphysical religion, say Christianity or Islam, excuse me, then the goal of life becomes, what's the goal of life?
To obtain it.
Serve
Yeah.
God.
Discover it.
To obtain it and do what?
To share it.
Apply it and then share it. That's right. Right? So the assumptions that all metaphysical systems of theory make, first about mind, is that there's something special about humans, whether it's reason or a soul, that is simultaneous with the body, right? Because this is Nick Dungy who's thinking. This is my body. I'm in an actual time and space. I'm in Prague. It's 10 after 7 at night, right? I'm thinking. I'm bombing this lecture. I'm struggling through this lecture, so I'm not thinking very well, right? But I'm doing it, right? And I'm trying to convey something true about philosophy. Okay. Now that means that on the assumption that the deep ideas that we're talking about, that I'm aware of, that I'm struggling to convey, that we're kind of talking about, all of that, it's always already there. It's there by nature. It's there because God put it in us. It's always already there. So the content is already in our mind. So the project is one of becoming more aware of that content and cultivating that content, cultivating our understanding of that content, right? So let me give you an example. So Plato will say that we're all born in a cave. We're all born in a cave, and by which he means a kind of culture, where we're born in a culture, a cave, which is a culture, which is a cave. And we have these opinions from the community about what justice is. But all we're seeing are shadows of it. We're not seeing the truth of it, but we're arguing about it. We think the shadows are true, but we're arguing. And then someone gets out of the cave. Socrates gets out of the cave. He climbs out of the cave. He goes out the mouth of the cave. And then one day he's standing outside the cave and he sees the sun, and the sun is illuminating everything. And then he says, "Oh my God, this is a tree. This is the things as they are." Boy, we were back there in the cave, right? We were still arguing about, we were still talking about justice, but we were arguing over shadows. Now I see, right? Same thing in Christianity, right? You can be born, have a soul, but not have the right understanding, as the story goes, about God. And then one day someone comes and they save you. Hey, right? Did you hear? By the way, that tree that you're worshiping, that's not God. Let me tell you about God. And they give you the Bible and you read it and you go, "Oh, fuck, that's right. Oh, wow, look at that." And now your content has been improved about religion. Okay. Now this is, go ahead.
Okay, when you say the content is already in our mind, and then you're talking about reason and the soul, are we supposed to separate those two concepts, reason and the soul, depending on whether or not we're talking about philosophy or New Testament Christianity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For the purposes of this class, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, let me just complicate this a little bit. To be sure, Socrates will talk about the soul, but he means reason. He doesn't mean, when Plato says justice is the well-ordered soul, he does not mean soul in the New Testament Christian way. He means mind. Okay, so generally speaking, at least for the purposes of how we're talking about it now, if we're talking about reason for Plato or the soul for Christian, we're talking about different things. But they function in kind of the same what?
Capacity.
Yeah,
Same way.
kind of the same way. Beautiful, you guys. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So all metaphysical systems of thought have to assume that there's already content where? Inside our what?
Nice.
Our minds or in our what?
Both.
Souls. And that content, whatever that is, that one, mind, reason, and soul make us aware of it. And then if we cultivate it by either doing philosophy or by reading the right book, then we can acquire what?
Knowledge.
Knowledge about the
of it.
truth.
Beautiful. We can acquire knowledge of it. And the purpose of life is to take that knowledge and do what?
Apply it to ourselves and to others.
That's right. And so we live how?
Well,
Well, give me some other adjectives. We live how?
Morally.
just
Morally, just, correctly, healthy. Okay. Now, Linda, we're buzzing around your question there, okay? So just keep that.
Yes.
We're buzzing and moving around your question, okay?
I have a second part to my
No.
question.
Not right now. You do in about 10 minutes. Now, second thing we have to say, because we got to finish this. The second assumption, and this is critically important, right? And if we don't understand this, we can't understand nominalism as an alternative account of language, as an alternative theory of language, okay? So now we have a decent understanding of the assumption that all metaphysical systems of thought must make about mind. Now let's talk about language, because we're talking about mind and we're also talking about what? Language, okay? So let's continue to unpack these ideas. So what do you think is the assumption, generally speaking, that all metaphysical systems of thought have to make about language? Or what do they make? Forget what they have to make. What do they make?
That
Meaning?
it
Go ahead, Christina.
that it kind of like connects in some way to a cosmic truth.
Yes, but be more specific, Christina. You're absolutely correct. Be more specific, though. That what connects?
That words, specific
Words.
words, justice,
Words.
self.
Love you. And literally not just words, but what about the words?
What they mean.
What they mean. Okay. Love you so damn much. Love you guys. Great questions, man. Great answers, great questions today. So let's just put what Christina just said in a kind of a statement. For all metaphysical systems of thought, and I'll give you examples of each one, okay? For all metaphysical systems of thought, philosophy, religion, or science, generally speaking, they have to make some core assumption about language. And when I say language, I mean words. And not just words, but the meanings of words. Okay? All metaphysical systems of thought make this claim, have this assumption built into them that words and the meanings of words can and do ultimately correctly correspond to, as Christina said, the objective truth. Right? That there's this belief that you can find, and by the way, it's not easy, it's very hard. The whole history of metaphysical philosophy, what have we been trying to do? We've been trying to discover the right words and meanings to get us closer to correspond with what?
truth.
The truth. The truth. Right? And there's the assumption inside metaphysical systems of thought about language that there is, and that we can find it, right? The correct what? Word. That there's the correct word. And not just correct word, but more importantly, the correct definition to a word. Right? So Plato was searching, Plato believed that out there in the cosmos somewhere was an objectively true definition of what? Justice. Right? And that in some way, awareness of that I was already as an idea, a noumenal idea, content in our mind, and that we could somehow discover the correct word and the correct definition that corresponds to it. Right? So all metaphysical systems of thought assume that there can be correct and incorrect or less correct words and definitions. And that the goal is to equip ourselves with the most correct words and definitions that most accurately correspond with what? The truth. Now, if you're religious, right, this argument is even taken one step further. Right? If you were religious, if you are Christian or Muslim, you are fully committed to this account of language, because you are fully committed to the idea you can't be Christian or Muslim without being in some deep way committed to this idea. You can't be. It's not possible. You're mixed up in your mind about what you're doing. You're committed to the idea that the actual words in the Bible or the actual words in the Quran are actually whose words?
God's words.
God's. Here they are. God. And the difference between philosophy and religion, in philosophy, Plato says you got to go find the words. But if you think deeply and you ask lots of questions and you have a serious dialectic, right? Maybe you'll kind of find them. But religion takes it just one step further, easier. It says, "Hey, don't worry about finding them. Here they what?
Yeah.
Here they are." And by the way, this is the difference between reason and revelation, right? In religion, the word, the language, literally the words, the actual words and the meaning are revealed by who? God. To whom? Us. Right? And so at a very deep level, if you are committed to some sort of metaphysical Christianity or metaphysical Islam, you are committed to believing that the words you are reading are literally the words of who? God. You're speaking to God. Here they are. Here is the right word for marriage. Here is the right word for justice. Here is the right word for sexuality. Here's what they mean. Here's what they mean. This is the correct. And by the way, you can translate it in all different languages, and the Quran still means the same what? Generally speaking. Same thing. The Bible has been translated into 160 languages, but it still claims and it still asserts that the meaning is still the what? Same. And that meaning is connected. It's not just connected, it's a pipeline. From who?
God.
About what?
The truth.
The truth. And about how you should be doing what? Living. Right? Yes, the answer is yes. Both for metaphysical Islam and metaphysical Christianity. Now, to be sure, people can, the Shias and the Sunnis, they can fight inside the text about what this passage means, or the familial relationship to the prophets, or the Christians and the Catholics and the Protestants can debate about, in certain interpretations of passages. But nobody, whether you're a Sunni or a Shia, never are you ever saying, hey, these words and these meanings aren't what? Ultimately what?
The truth.
The truth. That damn straight. So this is really important. All metaphysical systems of thought at a fundamental level say two things in a way. One, awareness or potential content of the truth is always already where?
In our minds, or
already a part of us, either in our minds as reason or in our what?
our souls.
Souls as gifts from God. This is critical. The content is already there. Plato would say by nature, we are rational by nature. We have this awareness and this potential knowledge of true justice already inside our mind, our reason. The Christians will say, awareness and potential knowledge of God is already where? It's in us, as us, in the soul. And we have these sacred texts that God gave to the prophet, that God gave to Jesus and the apostles. Here they are. If you read this book, you're going to connect what's already in your soul, or your soul as awareness, to, here it is, to the truth. And then the project of life is to live it and no deviate. Live it and don't deviate. Now, I'm going to respond to Linda's question, and then we're going to stop here. And then on Tuesday, we will talk about what nominalism is as a theory of language and how it's different from what we've just spoke about today. Okay? Okay. Now, Linda's question is the question. And it is the driving energy behind Nietzsche and Foucault. For Plato, for metaphysical theology, and even in a more nuanced way for enlightenment, normative, social, medical, behavioral, and physical sciences. There is, and I'll be less confrontational about this. I want to keep my job for another semester. Therefore, for each one of these systems of thought, there are potentially objectively identifiable, superior and inferior ways of what?
Living.
Of living. And to get specifically to Linda's question, and one of the deep reasons why Nietzsche thinks so much nihilism, so much life-hating, so much ressentiment emerges in our minds and in our bodies and in our politics as a result of Platonic morality and Christian theology is because There's this deep, deep intuitive awareness, right? If there is a truth, whether it's Plato's justice, whether it's Christian morality, whether it's now Enlightenment psychological norms of thinking and body and sexuality, right? Health, what we call health. Health is the new morality. Health is the new morality. It functions like the new morality. Now, here's the issue. This was Linda's question, and there's a couple levels of it. One, if there's a truth out there, we have this awareness and content of it. It's the purpose of life, one, to acquire it and live according to it, right? Okay, one, that's profound in and of itself, because as Leslie just said, there are superior ways of living and there are inferior ways of living, right? And because of the moral connotation, they're not just inferior ways of living, they are immoral, they are sinful, they are unhealthy, they are deviant, they are ignorant. Socrates would call an inferior way of life ignorance. So not only do you have this categorization of these morally and objectively true superior forms of life juxtaposed to the inferior, the deviant, the immoral, the sick, the unhealthy, not only do you have that, but Linda's question was really even deeper. Because it touches on the second type of objective truth. Right? The truth of the self. The truth of the self. Plato believed there was a true self, an objectively true self. There was a true Nick Dungy. And nature had put into Nick Dungy what should have been his purpose. In the Republic, Plato talks about this quite specifically. Right? And by the way, we hear this all the time still in this culture. We say all the time, well, I'm not really good at those things. I'm really good at this. It's my nature to be mathematical, or it's my nature to play professional sports, or it's my nature to be an accountant. Right? I was born to do this. I was born to be a baseball player. I was born to be a professor. I was born to be an accountant or a novelist. Right? And we hear this all the time. It's a residue of Platonism. You hear this all the time. People say, hey, figure out what you're supposed to do. Figure out what you're good at. Figure out what your nature is, what you're supposed to do, and do it well. Right? That's a kind of metaphysics, saying, hey, there's one thing you were kind of supposed to do. Your job in life is to fucking figure it out, and then what? Do it. Do it. Now, okay. Same thing again in Christianity. God gave you a unique personality, right? Each one of you is different than Nick Dungy as a unique creation of God. Okay, all right. Now, Linda's question is in many ways a version of the second driving theme of postmodernism. What happens? So if something is true, you've got some natural aptitude, or you've got some natural skills, right? And for whatever reason, those skills or those aptitudes or those behaviors or those tendencies don't align with what is morally correct. The example of the LSAT that I've been giving is an example of this. In this culture, we have a way of measuring intelligence. These tests. And they're designed to measure one's ability to read, intake, analyze data, create solution. Right? And that's a measure of what we call intelligence, and we think it's somehow scientifically grounded, and we think it's somehow telling, this is me, Nick Dungy's intelligence is whatever it is. right? If I take my IQ test, or if I take some psychological aptitude test, right? This is designed to kind of measure the accuracy and the truth of my intelligence, my emotional aptitude, whatever it happens to may be. Well, what happens if you are deviant or fall from those norms or even those higher expectations? Right? There's nothing you can do about it. The truth is the truth. Right? Truth is the truth. And this is one version of the story about the LSAT. I'm still waiting to hear from 9 people who took the test. Haven't heard from them. Don't know how they did. Now, I know damn well how they did. That's why I haven't heard from them. And cycling back to a theme we've been talking about now for 3 weeks, it's shattering. Why haven't I heard from them? They're embarrassed. They have shame. Why? Because they took a test that they believe measures their intelligence, and not just that, but places them in a hierarchy of value in what's left of this capitalist, consumer-driven society. It places them in a hierarchy of value. And they believe these things to be somewhat true. Now they have discovered, they have proof that they're not as intelligent, which is horrific. The fact that I'm even saying this and I can hear the words coming out of my mouth is horrific to me. It's so abusive. It's so oppressive. It's so abusive. It's so marginalizing. It's so crippling. That's why we're teaching this class, to liberate you from these sorts of feelings. What are the consequences to your minds, your bodies, and your politics that result from your belief in an objective truth and the sense that you need to acquire knowledge and live it, and your commitment to it? What are those?
Mind control.
All right? I haven't heard from them. And last point, and we'll call it a night, call it a day for you. This was Linda's point. This isn't even the worst part of what we're talking about from a Nietzschean point of view. Let me preface that from a Nietzschean point of view. We're not even at the worst part yet. In fact, Linda's question gets us to the worst part. What's the worst part?
Can we buy into it?
No, that's my point. That's not even the worst part. The worst part isn't that you buy into it and that you haven't called Professor Dungy to let me know because you're ashamed. You're sick.
Is that you lose yourself? You become sick, and
you're already sick. But from a kind of a Nietzsche's critique of a metaphysical argument, what's the worst part?
That we're restricted by it?
Yeah, okay, but yeah, you're clearly restricted by it emotionally and conceptually as it operates in you. But let's connect this to what Linda said. What's the worst part of it? You're right, Leslie. But let's talk about another dimension of being restricted. You're restricted in the most fucking profound metaphysical way. And this was Linda's question. You're restricted in the most profound effing way, because if this is true, and this is the true record of your intelligence, at the end of the day, there's nothing what?
We can do about it.
You can do about it. You're done. And you see this empirically in this culture. The students study really hard. They spend thousands of dollars on the Princeton scam, and they hire LSAT attorneys, and they quit their jobs, and they move out of the parents' house just to practice for this exam. So one, they can have proof that they're geniuses, and two, so someone will marry them. Valuable. Doesn't work out. Even if they get an average score, it's not what they wanted. It's not what they thought they were. It's not what they thought the truth of themselves were. It's not what they thought the truth of their value would be. So what do? They postpone the applications, spend $10,000 more to do it. They take the test again. And even if they improve their score, they improve it by how many points?
A few.
What?
A few points.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Nobody goes from a 150 on the LSAT to a 179. They go from a 150 to a 154.
I think the cap is 15. You can improve it by like 15 points.
Yeah, right. Right? The movement isn't great, ever. For 95% of the people that take the test again, they improve their score by 2 or 3 points. So now they even have more evidence that it's confirmed. This is your truth. There's nothing you can do about it. And if you wanted to be a lawyer and you thought you were smart and this was what your value was going to be, you're shattered. Okay. Sense of self, shattered. Dreams, shattered. Value, shattered. Now it's even worse. Because I guess in a more deeply metaphysical system, now whatever you do wasn't going to be what you wanted. It's not going to be the value you hoped to attain in life. And so there's a kind of a sickness about one's life. There's a kind of a despair. A kind of what's the right word? A kind of a, yeah, a despair.
But that's only if we believe it.
Nietzsche and Foucault want to help you escape that self-hatred. That's the point. All right. Love you guys. Intense today. Hang in there. On Tuesday, we'll talk about what nominalism is and how it differentiates itself from metaphysical notions of mind and language.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, sir.
You guys good?
Thank
Yep,
you.
thank you.
Tell me you're
Thank you,
good.
We're
Bye.
good.
Have a
Good,
good
good.
weekend.
Okay, love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, bye, Brian.